The main idea is that Hans Reichenbach talked about two contexts in science. One is the context of justification, the other is the context of discovery. So, the context of justification is when a theory is developed and then you try to understand what are its philosophical implications. Modern scientific theories are known to have philosophical implications, and the context of discovery is, does philosophy play a role in the development of science? You see? Not just only when a theory is developed you try to link it to philosophy. So in the context of justification, philosophy is called philosophy of science. That means there is science, and what kind of philosophy does it lead to? What kind of worldview? Concepts of space, time, causality, what is matter? These are some of the early issues in physics, even from Newton's time, that dealt with, that already philosophers have talked about it before that, for a long time. But with science, I think there was a perception, of course, today very strongly so, that if science has something to say about a philosophical topic, then that trumps whatever philosophy says, unless philosophy takes due cognizance of science. For example, what is life? I mean, traditionally, our own Indian tradition, so many, Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, they have all talked about some kind of a continuity after, death. Whether you call it soul, or anatman, or whatever it is, there are different ideas, but that idea is strongly there. Buddhism strongly embraces reincarnation. I think Jainism also does. Of course, Hinduism is the originator of that idea. But today, if there were actually discussions, say, about pro-life versus pro-choice in the West, should be abortion, at what time abortion is permitted, when can the fetus be considered a living individual or something, the expert opinions of biologists will be taken, and if anybody else had any other notion, that will not be taken seriously at all. Am I right about that? They will say that this is not even scientific. I'm not saying it's right. That will be there. That kind of an idea will be there. Suppose if we were come to say that, no, actually, according to Indian thought, Vedantic thought, the soul comes down in the form of, rain, and from higher planets or whatever it is, and gets, when somebody eats food, it goes into the food, and it goes into then the vital fluid of the male, and then it enters the female. That is the explanation is there. Then what is the scientific proof for it? Such that Quine said, philosophy of science is philosophy enough. If you just see what science has to say about traditionally philosophical ideas, and then you discuss that in the context of science, that's enough. There is no great system building in philosophy. Now there is not a single philosopher who is going to talk about ethics and metaphysics and epistemology and everything and build a whole system like Plato did or others before him did. It's more focused, specialized. Genetic ethics today involves issues that are completely different from what would have been considered philosophical topics on ethics. If are you going to cutting down trees in the forest for lumber, is it good or bad? it is not seen, it is seen more in the light of, to what extent that would cause global harming or disturb the global weather, than whether trees are also living entities. And of course there is a Gaia hypothesis like that. I think you get the general idea. So science actually trumps in some sense. The context of discovery, I call it philosophy in science. It is different from philosophy of science. So philosophy in science is like when you do philosophy to develop a theory in science. Then it's not really called philosophy, but it's called science. Just like you do mathematics in physics, but it's not called mathematics, it's called physics. You write Newton's equation, F equal to ma, and you solve it. You can put boundary conditions and this and that. And you're not doing mathematics, you're doing physics. So mathematics so there is pure mathematics, there is applied mathematics. Right? And that applied mathematics then actually takes the identity of the field in which it's applied, especially when it comes to physics. In economics and all, they might say, but you're still not doing mathematics, you're doing economics when you're doing calculations. So philosophy in science, a famous example is when Einstein was developing the theory of relativity. So it involved crucial ideas about simultaneity in the beginning. You had to think about it. Anybody here who would like to define what is simultaneity according to you? Anybody put here? Any English word? Simultaneous. When you say two things happen simultaneously, what do you mean by that? Anji? Huh? They happened at the same time. Huh?
And they are different.
And?
They are different. Different events happening at the same time.
Yeah, of course. In two different locations, say for example. So how would you know that they happened at the same time? You see, because how would you know? Because if you had the clock only here, I know the event happened here at what time. But if at that other place it happened, how would you know it happened at the same time? So you see, that's a common sense notion of simultaneity, but Einstein had to think about it. How am I going to measure simultaneous events? Then he realized that events can be arbitrarily far away. It won't do. Suppose I'm now speaking and she's writing. I can say simultaneously she is writing, and the time it takes for light to come from there to here is so little that it is good enough for most. But you could have two events, one happening here and one in another galaxy, light years away, which means light takes many years to come here. Then how would you know? It's simultaneous, but in principle it should be possible. At the moment something is happening here, something else could happen in some other galaxy. Therefore, the definition of simultaneity was a problem for him. What physicists and philosophers of physics call as operationalism. Operationalism is actually a philosophical school, and they say that the meaning of a concept lies in the method of its verification. So Einstein realized that if two things are very far away, then there must be a way a signal from there should reach here for me to know when it occurred there. And I need to have clocks that are calibrated in both places. And he realized that if I need to have a signal from there to come here, And if the signal, if the two places can be arbitrarily far away, right? Million miles, 10 million miles, 10 billion miles, 10 billion light years, there's no limit. Obviously, I cannot put a limit to the speed of the signal. Right? It would become too slow if I increase the distance. So the signal has to be infinite speed. Are you all following the logic? Anybody not following the logic? Well, let me ask the positive question. How many are following the logic here? Please put your hands up. Okay. So the Einstein realized that if signals are coming at infinite speed, then there is no ordering of events. Nothing is before and after. And if there is no ordering of events, there is no causality. Because cause must happen traditionally before the event. Are you all following? Therefore, he said, if I am going to deal with physics as a measurable science, either I should give up causality or I should give up simultaneity. So it's all philosophical ideas, but it had physical meaning later. Are you following this argument? So he gave up the notion of simultaneity in that physics. You have to be very clear. It's not a universal prescription. Nothing is saying that you should give up the notion of simultaneity altogether. So he had a physics problem. To solve that, somehow he latched onto this idea of simultaneity as a core issue. And to solve his problem, he decided to give it up. So when he gave it up, simultaneity, he said times of two events, could change depending on certain conditions. If there are two inertial frames that are mutually accelerating with respect to each other, things of the lot. Let's not go into it. But the main point is he gave up the idea of simultaneity, which is in common sense. And he had a physics. Now if you had, so what does it mean for philosophy? It's the question. And if you're going to talk about, cause, things can happen simultaneously, then you got to really navigate around theory of relativity. That's an example of philosophy in science. Philosophy was used within science. And, I can give more examples, but what I'm trying to show you at this point, the learning module here, take-home lesson, is that the relation between science and philosophy can be in two contexts, and generally it is done in the context of justification. But I have worked in that field also, but I work in the context of discovery, mainly because I am myself discovering a new form of physics, and I'm using philosophy, and especially Indian philosophy, at least as I think of it.